Over to the West region, the game I teased, number 1 seed Florida taking on 4th seeded Maryland. And this question has been tossed around, kind of like the NIL thing over the last couple of days, a little bit more niche. Did Derek Queen, in your eyes, travel on that buzzer beater to send the Terps to the round of 32? To me, it reminded me, after watching the replay of Tremont Waters and his near travel against Maryland going back to the 2019 tournament on his buzzer beater. Apples and oranges, it's so hard to call in the moment. I don't think you can, but where are you on that one?
I'll say this. There are a couple things. One, when I watched the game live, as you probably did, and I didn't see a travel when it was live. With all the replays, I think you could say, all right, well, I can see maybe I need to look at it again and again. I think if you have to look at it 2 or 3 times, you're probably on the side of, I don't think that should have been called. And obviously the officials are looking at that real time. I don't subscribe to the theory that, you just don't call that at that point in the game. If you walked, call it. If you didn't, don't. But I didn't see it live. So that's one thing. When, Gene Steratore is an awesome guy. I'm sure he was a great official. I always hate it when broadcasters say, well, we have a great officiating crew. How do we know? I don't know whether these guys are good or not. You figure, like, what we should be saying is this is a veteran officiating crew that has been doing Final Fours and all that stuff. I don't know whether they're good or not. But anyway, when Gene Steratore was talking about it, he talked about the rule and then sort of endorsed the call. And I don't have any reason to argue with that. When I've discussed this with supervisors, this kind of thing, one of the things I always ask is, after they say, okay, this is the rule, I think it was properly called. I always ask, okay, if it were called to travel and I asked you about it, would you say it was a bad call? That's what I would like to have heard from Gene or another officiating expert. That to me is the question. If it were called to travel, would you tell me it was a bad call? Or an incorrect call. Bad call, it has a connotation to it. Would you say it was an incorrect call? My sense is, if the official had called to travel, people in a supervisory role or an expert commentating on it, like a Gene Steratore, not him, but like a Gene Steratore, would have, my guesses would have said, yeah, it was a travel. But I don't know that for sure. That's just been my experience in talking about this with officials on calls like that. But I have no qualm with it at all, because and this isn't to say this is the right way to do it, but when I'm calling a game, if I have to look at the replay to determine whether it was right or wrong, I usually never say anything. If I don't say it at the time, like, if I can't see it, why would I expect the official to see it? That's sort of my way of looking at it. And maybe I violated my own rule at times and gone and, said, hey, I had one in the SEC tournament where a guy tapped a ball out on a rebound. They called a foul on him. And I go, that doesn't look like a foul. Like, he's just tapping it out. And then you looked at it on a replay and I go, that was a terrible call. I mean, that was horrible. Stuff like that. So there are times I go back at replay and maybe confirm that I said, I don't think that's right. Maybe I violate my own rule. So, whistle me and call foul on me for that one.
Fair enough. Well, I can't wait to get your analysis on this game. If we look at Florida and Maryland, Gators were tested by the 2-time defending champs on Sunday. Walter Clayton, though, taking over down the stretch. And meanwhile, the Terps haven't lost a single game this year by more than 6 points. Unsurprisingly, the line for this game is pretty much consensus Florida -6.5. And the great guard matchup between Clayton and Gillespie, and the bigs with Florida against Queen and Reese. So what are your expectations for this very heightened Sweet 16 matchup?
I think Florida and Duke are the 2 best teams in the country. That's not to say that Houston or Auburn aren't, right there. But I think if this were the NBA playoffs, we'd see Florida and Duke going against each other. If they were 7-game series, that's how highly I think of those 2 teams and how they're playing right now. Florida is bigger across the board. They're deeper across the board. And they have something that very few teams have. They have a certified bucket getter that can create his own in Walter Clayton Jr. Like what he did in the last minutes against UConn won the game, because UConn was headed toward an upset there. I mean, it sounds bizarre to say UConn and upset in the same breath, but UConn was they were primed to win that game, and but for the heroics, and Walter Clayton Jr. putting the cape on at the end of that game, Florida probably wouldn't have survived that. And having that sort of weapon in your arsenal is that's a force multiplier. So I mean, it's not to say Maryland, excuse me, Maryland can't win. They can, but I certainly favor Florida. I think they're better.